I'm so glad you talked a little bit about your investment thesis, because
Sure.
you actually talk a little bit about the filtering process. If you guys are going to harness your ecosystem and deploy and infuse capital with this company, whatever that deal may be, whether it's different alternative investing, private equity, VC, direct, whatever it may be, you talk a lot about kind of your criteria, and it's actually very heavy. And I thought that was actually really a breath of fresh air, if you will, in regards to your investment thesis. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that, where you talk obviously the kind of quality that you're looking in regards to the founder, what they need to have, several years, and other different instruments and thesis. Please share that a little bit, because I thought that was just really, really remarkable.
We have come to an early, when we set up the multifamily office that does a lot of venture stuff in life sciences, it was mostly real estate investors who had a gateway drug to life sciences, but through philanthropy, and they were screwing it up. And they were giving to these foundations that had high expense ratios and made them feel good, but only 10% of the dollar really made it towards its intended purpose. And we found out that our biggest strength was our network. And what it was is that a lot of these deals I had been doing with Dan Drew Partners beforehand with a few cowboy families who trusted me. But I went out there and I said to them, look, we're not going to invest in anything in venture that doesn't fit these two things, at least two, okay? And this is important, but people take it for granted. We bet on people. All risk is human. So first, if it's a founder or a real estate sponsor, we'll start with venture first. I want them to have multiple exits. We're doing a deal right now where it's going to be it's called Thrive Bioscience. It'll be the founder's 15th exit and possibly his 8th unicorn. These are people you want to invest into. Now, there's also smart money too. And when you look at a venture company or any sort of entity that's private you're investing into, the cap table or the other investors is really the soul of the asset, because that tells you if this guy has a good network or not. And when you see other larger leading name brand families who have a specialty in this going into it, then that adds a tremendous amount of conviction. And so for us, then we know that there's other smart people at the table and we can compare notes and gossip and everything. Because the definition of risk that nobody really wants to talk about is everybody has a quantitative approach and they'll come up with all sorts of things where they talk about negative beta and all this stuff. But really at the end of the day, it means if anything goes wrong, who are you going to point the finger to? And that's really what it comes down to. They're going to point it to you because you made the bad decision, or you're going to point it to the CEO because he didn't know what he was doing and something happened personally in his life. And it becomes an issue. So when you have a CEO that's had a tremendous amount of experience, there's also a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence too. You can have very, very smart people, and I liken it to like a V12 Mercedes engine. But if they don't have the emotional intellect or the emotional quotient to be able to transact in a way or deal with life situations, then really they don't have a strong enough transmission. If you put a V12 in a Honda transmission, what's going to happen? It's not going to work, right? The engine will blow up, or the transmission will just drop, or just, who knows what will happen. I'm not really a big car buff, but it'll never get to its intended recipient, which is the rubber on the road, as far as the traction. So when you look at these these operators, I want them to see that they've done this before. And moving to Miami has become a tremendous tech center, if you will, post-pandemic, and although after SVB and that whole Silicon Valley Bank debacle has sort of slowed down a little bit, there were a lot of people who had very pretty pitch books, cool logos, some board of advisors, but that really just, that they weren't really doing anything. And, when you see through it all, it's just nothing but a great idea with a pretty pitch book, and I'm looking for the depth, meaning if there is another Silicon Valley Bank, if there is another pandemic, if there's another, just because it's extreme now doesn't mean that it's necessarily rare. And, if there is another 500 basis point hike in the markets, who am I going to want to be in bed with at that point when things go wrong? And I think a lot of people don't look at it that way. They look at it from what can go right? Look at everything that can go right. Well, this guy is smart. Yes, he's, turning 50 and it's his first, entrepreneurial endeavor, but he's got a great idea and a great pitch book. That's not enough for me. So by the time it comes to us, people know that we have to look at things, and we only look at first class opportunities, and that's how we do it. And in real estate, it's a little more. It's a little different than that, but because I'm sure there's real estate investors here who are looking to invest passively into real estate, we have a great track record, and we're very protective of the track record because of the fact that we follow 3 rules. Before it even gets to my plate, before it gets to the point where I have to actually look at it, I want a sponsor that's been through at least 2 economic cycles. first economic cycle, I guess you can say, going back would be 2008, and then one before that probably going back, to the late 90s. That shows that they have the network and the conviction to be able to work through difficult issues, and they have the network themselves to get things loosened up quickly. I also want to see them put a meaningful sponsor commitment, co-invest into it. Sometimes you'll see them put nothing into it. Sometimes they'll roll fees into it if they're playing broker-dealer. We've all seen that game. But one of the things that I like to see is, put in a maximum amount. 5% is cute, 10% is thoughtful. Anything more shows complete conviction. And that's really what we're stating right now, is that some of the deals we do, the sponsor puts in, 30% or 40%. That makes me feel much more warm and fuzzy at night going to bed, knowing in the middle of a pandemic that there's a lot of bad things that need to happen before I or my investors lose money. And then the last thing, too, is an audited track record. I want to make sure that we get an audited track record as well. If your track record is so great, how come you didn't pay to get it audited? And this is, to us, it sort of gives me the creature comforts knowing, okay, now we can start looking into the numbers of the deal. Because before then, who cares about the numbers? If you're not dealing with the best in class, why would it matter? Don't even follow, and people do this, and investors don't understand this who are new to this game, is that, there's a lot of, that models function both in
that's why I really wanted to, foot stomp on this, because I just thought that was so cool how you have these high hurdles.
And so when you look
that
at it,
you are really,
you really need to know what to look at before, and you need to really have some sort of determined rules, a structure around it before you start taking other people's money.
It does, and filtering out majority of these deals, right, before they even land on your, like you mentioned, all the, and so I want to talk a little bit about that.